Hello, everyone. And I wanted to talk to you about some research I've been doing into group behavior and um, the development of group behavior, relationships between people within your group and outside of your group, and how Disney has to do with all of these different groups within our society, or many different groups in our society. And the central question from all of this is whether Disney as a company, as fandom of Disney, can that be something that brings people together? Can it be a catalyst for shared perspectives, if you will, amongst people that may not agree on other things? So, a couple notes for people who are watching this on YouTube. Um, each section of the presentation, if you will, has a quote from either a real life Disney person or a Disney movie. And so if you see those and you can pick up on those, please let me know where you found them. Um, and you can see I've put the slide number at the top of the slide so you can see the slide numbers. You can let me know in the comments. If you're listening, you'll also be able to see if you can pick up on those because I'll be reading those before each section. The last thing specifically, if you are watching on YouTube, let me know if you found any hidden Baffids. Just like in being a fan of Disney the book, I have placed hidden Baffids throughout this presentation. And so on this screen, excuse me, you see one hidden Baffid. It's the castle with in silhouette with Mickey in the middle, a Mickey head in the middle, and then the letters BAFOD on top of that castle surrounding it. So just for fun, let me know if you found those in the comments or on social media or anything. So to explain some of this, let's go ahead and get started. So the first section is to all who come to this happy place, welcome. Maybe. My research started, as a lot of people know, within the sport context and looking at competition and rivalry within the sport context and how people relate to their favorite teams and relate to their rival teams, and also supporters of their favorite team and supporters of their rival team. Now, it quickly transitioned from there to looking at how the way rival competitions are promoted can influence the way people talk to each other, the way people perceive each other and behave toward each other. And essentially, then started looking at how can we be better stewards of positive interactions or interactions that are not going to take away from the game playing experience or the game watching experience for people. And so from there, we started looking at here's what we know in sport, and here's how we know people behave toward each other in sport, and here's how we, as marketers, as practitioners, influence those types of behaviors toward each other. How do people outside the sports setting, feel about supporters of their favorite brands and supporters of competing or rival brands? And that's really where we got to this line of questioning and these kind of general questions, leading to what we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. So, a few questions for you. Are you a sports fan? Are you a fan of Disney Plus? Are you a fan of Amazon Prime Video, Netflix, other streaming channels? Do you play games? Do you consider yourself a gamer? If so, do you play on a PC? Do you play on Xbox or do you play on PlayStation? What kind of mobile phone do you use, Samsung or Apple? Are you a fan of either Star Wars or Star Trek or both? Are you a fan of Marvel or DC or both? So those are some of the questions that we asked participants to gauge how people felt about supporters of their favorite brands and supporters of their rival brands in and out of the sports context. So, what we did at this point, we have done 11 different comparison studies. Sport was compared to a non-sport setting in all of these examples. But overall, we have researched and we have data about fan behavior in 12 different settings. And here's where you see that. So we have it in sport, in politics, online gaming, so people who use a PC or a computer versus people who use a console such as Xbox or PlayStation. Um, Streaming services like Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime Video, others. We have done this study in gaming consoles, so specifically or specific to Xbox and PlayStation. We've also done this research in mobile phones between Apple and Samsung, science fiction between Star Wars and Star Trek, comics between Marvel and the DC brands, Disney parks, Disney fans and Universal and their perception toward Universal parks. We've also done it in religion, athletic footwear, and theme parks in general. And so these are the 12 settings where we have this information, and we'll get into explaining a little bit more about this. And so the next section is let's get on with the show. The way we compiled this information that we'll talk about here in just a little bit, without getting too much into the methodological weeds, is we created something called the Group Behavior Composite, or the GBC. And essentially, that's a 16 item scale with scores ranging from a 1, which would mean very positive views of an outgroup, to 7, meaning very negative views of an outgroup. Now, the GBC is made up of different scales that I have developed and validated throughout my research. One being the rivalry perception scale. And that's a 12 item scale that really looks at 4 different facets of competition and of rivalry, of outgroup perceptions. Willingness to support an outgroup in some endeavor that doesn't include your favorite team, the perceptions of the prestige of the outgroup, so how prestigious you believe that outgroup is, perceptions of outgroup member behavior. Are they well behaved? Are they not well behaved? And then the sense of satisfaction you get when your in group compares favorably to the outgroup in some direct setting. And then the last 4 questions of the group behavior composite actually come from another skill I developed called glory out of reflected failure, where that is asking if your in group is not involved in the equation whatsoever, how likely are you to celebrate when your out group or a rival brand or a rival team experiences some sort of failure? So taking all of those 16 items together, and those were combined to form the group behavior composite, so that each person who would answer these questions would have 1 score for the group behavior composite. And basically, after all of this, all of the analysis of the 12 different settings, one thing we were able to do is we were able to compare those settings. So here we are in the room where it happens. Here's the hierarchy of outgroup derogation, or the HOD. Now, these are the 12 settings put into 4 different categories. High negativity, which includes religion, online gaming, politics, and sport. Medium to high negativity, which includes athletic footwear and mobile phones. Medium negativity, which includes streaming services and theme parks, general theme park fandom. And then low negativity, which would include gaming consoles. That's people who use PlayStation versus Xbox to game. Then also including Disney parks, science fiction, Star Wars versus Star Trek, and comics, Marvel versus DC. Now, here are how those different settings rank. So if we look at the high negativity group, you can see religion is at the top, followed by online gaming, politics, and sport. Now, let's look at the low negativity group. We have gaming console, Disney parks, science fiction, and comics on the opposite sides or opposite ends of that table. Now, on to the next thing that we did. We were able to create a graphical representation or visual representation of these group settings. And so, never tell me the odds, we were able to develop the outgroup derogation spectrum, or the ODS. Now, on this spectrum, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see from a score of 1 being least negative to 7 being most negative, we've zoomed in on this spectrum between the scores of 3.5 to 5.0 because that's where these scores fell. Now, if you look at this spectrum, what you can see is wherever something falls on the spectrum kind of gives you more of a visual representation of how that setting, how much negativity that setting can influence toward the outgroup. So at the far right hand side, the most negative, you see religion has a mean score of 5.03. The next closest score to that is actually online electronic gaming, those people who use either a PC or a console to game. That has a mean score of 4.78. And then that's followed by politics with 4.75 and sport with 4.51. Those are most negative because you could see there's a little bit of separation between sport and then the next one being athletic training after because sport, politics, online electronic gaming, and religion are all above that 4.5 mark, which would mean that those are negative perceptions of the outgroup. Also, draw your attention to religion. That's above a 5, which means that's very negative perception of the outgroup. So people who based on that religious setting, that means people view someone who believes in a different religion or follows a different religion, they have more negative feelings toward those individuals or very negative feelings toward those individuals because they don't, but they're not in their in group. And then as we go from right to left, after sport, we have athletic footwear, mobile phones are pretty close to each other. Streaming and theme parks in that medium negativity group are right there together. They actually both have a mean score of 4.10. And then in the low negativity group, we start off with online console gaming. So again, those are people who are using either a PlayStation or an Xbox to game. That has a mean score of 4.02. Disney park specific fandom has a score of 4.01. Now 4.01 and 4.02, that's right on that neutral line. Basically, a 4.0 would be a neutral line. That means they have it's hard to discern if they have positive or negative perceptions of those outgroups. They really, really are pretty much right down the middle. But look at science fiction fans, fans of Star Trek or Star Wars. That mean score is a 3.73. And then we keep going with comics. Fans of Marvel or DC, they have a mean score of 3.53, which actually means that those fans have a positive, somewhat positive perception of supporters of their rival brand. And there are a few reasons why we can talk about here in just a little bit why that may be happening. But again, the spectrum gives a really, really good representation of all the way to the right. You see how negative the setting of religion can influence outgroup derogation compared to how uh, the settings such as Disney parks, science fiction, or comics can influence the way people look at supporters of their rival brand or their outgroup. Now, next, to kind of bring everything together, everything the light touches, here are the 6 fandom settings where Disney is involved. Out of the 12 that we have measured so far, Disney has involvement in sport because they have been involved in sport throughout their history. They've even owned 2 professional sport teams, the Anaheim Angels, which they called and then the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, sorry. They also have involvement in streaming through Disney Plus, through theme parks. They have involvement, especially in Disney theme parks. That's very specific to them. And then they also have involvement in science fiction through their ownership of Star Wars and comics through their ownership of Marvel. Okay, so here's something that's really, really interesting. Of the 6 settings that have been measured, I'm sorry, the 12 settings that have been measured, 6 of them Disney has something to do with. 5 of those settings are in the medium negativity or low negativity group. Sport is the only setting which Disney has a kind of a stake in that is in that high negativity group, which is really, really interesting. Look at the low negativity group, Disney parks fandom, science fiction fandom, and comics fandom. Those are all right at that negative, or I'm sorry, that neutral line or below, meaning that they either have a very, very neutral view of the outgroup or positive views of the outgroup. And so here is the central question that we will ask. Which wolf wins? The one you feed. So Disney, being that they have a stake in three of the four fandom settings that are in that low negativity group, can Disney represent a shared perspective? Can Disney be a brand that people can agree on, regardless if they agree on something else? So, for example, trying to look at people who may belong to a different religion or believe in a different religious ideology or a different political persuasion. Could their fandom in Disney be that shared perspective? Maybe someone who has different political persuasion or religious beliefs, they won't agree with someone on those in those areas. But can the fact that they both are fans of Disney and Disney theme parks, can that be something that ties those people together? Same thing with comics. Maybe they're Marvel fans or DC fans. Maybe they're Star Wars or Star Trek fans and science fiction. Can those be settings in which people can find some type of commonality to agree on something? And what this refers to is the common in group. If we are in the common in group, then that means we have membership in various groups. However, and each one of those groups say something about us. So, for example, if you are a fan of comics, you might be a fan of Marvel or DC. Whichever you're a bigger fan of, Marvel or DC, that would be that in group that you belong to. And then let's say you're a fan of Marvel, so you're in the Marvel in group, not as big a fan of DC, so DC fandom is the out group. However, also, because you're a fan of comics, if you're a fan of Marvel, you've probably read DC, DC to Marvel, vice versa. You probably have some type of awareness of the characters, of the storylines in those different comics. And so you also may be a fan of just comics in general. So you have your Marvel fans in one group, your DC fans in another group. However, they also belong to a larger in group of just general comics fans. And everyone outside of that group who maybe is not a fan of comics or somebody who says maybe you shouldn't be reading comics, those people are treated as the outgroup. Same thing with science fiction. You know, you have your Star Wars fans and your Star Trek fans. Those are two different groups, but put together, they're both, all of those are fans of science fiction. Okay, so that's what the common in group is. Now, where we ask the question of can Disney be a shared perspective or a catalyst for shared perspective, why that's important is because of something called the extended contact hypothesis. That means the longer you have contact with someone, the longer you know someone, the more likely you are to build a relationship with someone. Maybe be more understanding towards someone, be more forgiving towards someone. That doesn't mean you have to agree with that person, but ultimately, you will maybe be better understanding of someone. And if nothing else, be able to coexist with that person. And that's what extended contact hypothesis means. The longer you're around somebody that you may disagree with, the more understanding, excuse me, you can become toward that person or of that person. So, can Disney be that? Can Disney act as a catalyst for shared perspectives? And well, the section's called, well, I was born yesterday. And there's the question. Can Disney and being a fan of Disney, can that be that catalyst that can bring somebody together that may not agree in other areas? Okay. So if we're looking at, if we're looking at, because Disney has their stake in 6 of the 12 areas that we've studied. 5 of the 12 areas of those are in that medium negativity or low negativity group. Can the Disney brand be something that has a large enough fandom that it brings people together that may not agree on every issue or may not agree on many issues outside of being a fan of Disney? I believe that it can. I believe that that's something that the company can work toward and fans can work toward. And so that's something that's really, really interesting to me. And so what do we do from here? Well, we just keep swimming and we try to look at more research, trying to understand more about group behavior, but also looking at Disney as that potential area of joint or shared perspective, shared interest, and being a catalyst for bringing people together, which is something we really, really need right now in our greater society. I think a lot of people would agree on that. And so, can Disney be that? I think that it can. And that's something that I want to keep studying, something I want to keep researching and trying to learn more about and talking more about. And so I really, really appreciate you listening. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me, either on social media, through email, whatever. Reach out through the show, reach out however you want to reach out with questions, because I love talking about this and I love being able to discuss this with other fans of Disney and other fans of or other people in various fandoms. And so I really, really appreciate you listening and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.